I think it's ironic that your book is called Woke is Dead and you're against cancel culture, because clearly you want to cancel wokeism, which is your right. So you and I are on the same page, right? You clearly like cancel culture.
Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight's debate takes a sharp turn as a heated conversation about cancel culture and wokeism completely flips the script. What starts as a viral gotcha moment quickly turns into something much deeper. A clash over free speech, public backlash, hypocrisy, and whether criticizing an ideology is the same thing as trying to silence it. One side argues that calling out wokeism is just political speech and open criticism. The other side says many of the same people who condemn cancel culture are perfectly comfortable using public pressure and outrage when it targets ideas they dislike. And that's where this conversation really explodes. Is cancel culture being used as a catch-all label for any disagreement? Are people confusing criticism with censorship? And does the standard change depending on whose side you're on politically? Watch closely, because this exchange goes beyond the viral one-liner everyone's talking about and exposes the bigger debate happening across politics, media, and culture, right?
We're going to move on to the second topic. You guys stay, because everyone can join in.
All right.
This is Ernest Owens, author of The Case for Cancel Culture, which in itself is one of the most ludicrous book titles ever written. You think Woke is Dead is bad, mate? Try The Case for Cancel Culture.
Lovely title.
Let's have a look at Ernest's greatest hits. Ernest, why was somebody who's so traumatized by Kevin Spacey send him naked pictures of himself?
I think the larger point for me in all of this is that Kevin Spacey appears to have a bunch of skeletons in his closet. And I feel like the more he talks, the more I learn. And the more I learn more about him, the more I dislike him. And the more I don't want to buy a movie ticket to ever see him again.
See, Ernest, you were so censorious about Kevin Spacey, who has fought two cases, one in a criminal court, one in a civil court. He won both. He's not convicted of any crimes. And yet many people like you believe he should be cancelled because you don't like the perception he has skeletons in his cupboard. Now, I mean, do you have a completely squeaky clean background, Ernest? If we were to apply the Ernest Kevin Spacey logic to you, would you be appearing here on my show, or would you have to cancel yourself?
So for starters, I just want to say that I am not saying that Kevin Spacey should be canceled forever. If you actually read my book, you know that I talk about how there's a process around accountability. He was dealt with the courts. He has, suffered, consequences for his actions. And that's really what it's about, is about accountability. So this idea of, defining things, you can misdefine woke the way you want to, which I disagree with how you're defining it in this book. But, if you want to talk about cancel culture, it is about accountability.
You haven't read my book. How do you know?
And that was what I was calling for with the Kevin Spacey situation.
Ernest,
No, I'm talking about the way you just defined on the show.
Ernest, you haven't read my book. How do you know what's in it?
You just defined it. I said the way you defined it. I didn't talk about the whole book.
I haven't defined the book at all. Here's what I'm going to say about cancel culture. Hang on, Ernest. Here's a passage from the book about cancel culture, your specialist subject. People were cancelled for the most pathetic reasons and the stampede of frenzied outrage. It was now impossible to be woke enough. I don't think anybody really wants to live in a society of curtain-twitching snitches and armchair detectives raking over problematic social media posts from a decade ago. I don't think anyone really enjoys walking on eggshells and waiting for a knock on the door from the fun police. We've been liberated from the tyranny of the always offended and given a fresh crack at a world without cancel culture. That's why it's so important that we don't replace it with something equally bitter, ideological, grievance-ridden and censorious. And there was a great example of this with the comedian Graham Linehan. Now, not everyone agrees with his views, but he decided he was going to make this whole issue of the trans activism an issue where he would defend women's rights. Maybe he went too far with some of his rhetoric, with some of his posts. Maybe his jokes weren't that funny. But the idea that for posts on X in April, 5 armed police arrested him at Heathrow Airport and dragged him through the criminal mincer until, thank God, common sense prevailed. And the police announced not only were they not pursuing this case, but they were now no longer going to pursue at all any similar case like that, because they realised it's not their job to police free speech. If he's not inciting violence, and he clearly wasn't, they tried to make out that he was doing a crass joke, but he wasn't inciting violence against any individual. And I think that that is where my concern about cancel culture is, that if you're inciting violence, fine, that's not covered by free speech. No one should defend it, right? But if you're just being unpleasant, offensive, maybe even a bit hateful, you may not like it, Ernest Owens, but I'm entitled to be all those things towards you, and you are to me.
No one's disagreeing with that. I think what is important to note is that you're conflating several things. For starters, I think it's ironic that your book is called Woke is Dead and you're against cancel culture, because clearly you want to cancel wokeism, which is your right. So you and I are on the same page, right? You clearly like cancel culture because your title is called Woke is Dead and you want to cancel wokeism.
Yeah, but I'm doing to wokeism what cancel culture protagonists like you should want me to do. I'm canceling it.
Well, no. I want to cancel bigotry and hatred and racism and transphobia. And that's my opinion. Well, then I would argue that some of the behaviors of the comedian you spoke on, I don't think that the government should infringe upon his free speech rights, which is one thing, right? So I agree with you. I don't think law enforcement should have gotten involved. That was wrong, right? But again, I say the same thing about the FCC with Jimmy Kimmel, right? You're one of your guys, that you tend to be speaking positively about, the President of the United States. He wants to censor comedians who disagree with him politically. I think that is a right-wing version of wokeism. Wokeism is not just for progressives and leftists.
Let me surprise you. I don't disagree. I make the point in the book that you haven't read.
You're going to tell him, Piers.
The woke right is showing tendencies which are exactly the things they criticize on the woke left.
And I said that in my book, The Case for Cancel Culture, Piers. So if you read my book, you will know that I talk about when progressives cancel and when conservatives cancel.
I've been canceled.
It's all subjective. You just cherry pick whatever you don't like. So when you don't like something and it hurts you, then that's when you go against cancel culture, Piers. But you're in favor of cancel culture. You are.
You are woke, Piers.
You like it. You like it when it serves your benefit.
You are woke.
All right, easy, Tigers. Look at this. Look at the woke pack coming for me.
You're more woke than any of us.
And you're more woke than any of us. And not only that, the beautiful thing about it is that you got Donald Trump on speed dial. So you need to call him up and tell him just what you said.
Well, we're going to come to you and Donald Trump because you and I were on Question Time recently.
We were.
The BBC's flagship political show, in which you continue to call him Hitler and a Nazi.
I know I ain't call him a Nazi, I call him Hitler.
Yeah, well, Hitler was a Nazi.
I'll explain. I can explain.
You can explain why he's Hitler but not a Nazi?
Yes, I can.
I'd love to hear that explanation.
Okay, very happy
That's one of the maddest things you've ever said.
Very happy to.
Was Hitler a Nazi?
Of course he was.
Then you just answered your own question.
But the opposite doesn't mean the same. That doesn't mean it's true. Just because one preposition is true doesn't mean the other one is true. And I can explain it.
All right, well, I'm going to come to you, Bonnie, because don't worry, we've got a lot to discuss with you.
Good.
Ernest, finally on cancel culture. I do actually accept, for example, there's a good example of this in the UK at the moment. The president-elect of the Oxford Union Debating Society reacted to Charlie Kirk being murdered by posting on groups, LOL, laugh out loud, and then Charlie Kirk got shot, let's effing go, exclamation mark. In other words, he was celebrating the shooting. He says he didn't know he was actually dead, but the shooting of Charlie Kirk. Now, what made this particularly awful was that he had debated Charlie Kirk in the Oxford Union only 4 months before. Now, here's my point about him. I don't think he should be arrested for what he said. I don't think he should have government interference in censoring him or anything like that. He's perfectly entitled to what he said. But to your point about accountability, obviously he is unfit to be president of a debating society. And we should all agree that, right? We all like to debate. Right? But if you were suddenly shot, or you were Bonnie, or you were James, or God forbid I wouldn't expect anyone here to celebrate that news publicly in the way that guy did. So we should be able to agree that some of the parameters here shouldn't be very contentious, right? And that is that if you do something as despicable as that, I don't want you arrested for it. I don't want you put in a prison cell. But I do want you held accountable for what you said. And if what you've done is completely incompatible with the position that you're trying to occupy, which clearly it is, you can't run a debating society and celebrate people being killed for their views, then you should not be doing it.
I was on the Oxford Union debate, actually.
Sorry?
So what's interesting, I was actually on the Oxford Union debate earlier this year with Dave Rubin. When you had him on your show that week, I was actually on that debate. And so I do know the players there. And I think what's important to note is, like, your point is correct. The way in which we define who we choose to counsel is based on our own standards or the standards to which you're upholding the role, which is about civility. And often what happens, what I notice with people on the right, is that they'll claim that they're being canceled when said audience or said group holds them accountable to the standards to which they've agreed to. So if you are a school teacher and you're making inappropriate remarks about your students that could be considered racist or sexist or problematic, and you lose your job for that, you're not canceled for that. And I think that that's the problem.
I agree.
Is that people are using that. So that's what I believe in. That's what cancel culture is about. I think it's about accountability in that type of way. I'm not saying that the government should stop your First Amendment rights, but I am saying that, you know, the court of public opinion can weigh, which is what I was saying about Kevin Spacey.
At the end of the day, this debate shows why conversations about cancel culture almost always become messy so quickly. People are often using the same words to mean completely different things. One side sees public backlash as accountability and free speech in action, while the other sees it as an organized attempt to shame, pressure, or silence people into submission. And because those definitions are constantly shifting, every argument turns into a battle over who gets to define the terms first. What made this exchange interesting wasn't some instant knockout, line, or a viral mic drop moment. It was the fact that both sides exposed a real contradiction that exists all across modern politics. Almost everyone supports public pressure when it targets ideas they oppose, and almost everyone complains about cancel culture when that same pressure gets directed at them. That inconsistency is what keeps fueling these debates over and over again. The bigger issue here is that criticism, consequences, censorship, and social backlash are not all the same thing. But in online political discourse, they constantly get blended together. Losing public support is different from being silenced by the government. Being criticized online is different from being legally punished. And disagreeing with an ideology is not automatically the same as trying to erase it from society altogether. Those distinctions matter, even if they get lost in the world of cable news, clips, and social media. And honestly, that's probably why moments like this spread so fast. Online, people aren't just reacting to the argument itself. They're reacting to the feeling that the rules change. Depending on who's speaking, one side thinks the media protects certain ideologies while attacking others. The other side believes powerful figures weaponize free speech, rhetoric, while dismissing accountability whenever it affects them personally. That tension is what keeps audiences locked into these culture war battles. In the end, nobody completely won this conversation. What happened was something more revealing. Both sides unintentionally showed how selective and emotionally charged these debates have become. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. The fight over cancel culture was never really just about speech. It's about power, influence, social pressure, and who gets to control the cultural narrative in the first place. Let me know what you think in the comments. Was Ernest exposing hypocrisy? Or was the viral reaction overstating what actually happened? And do you think cancel culture has become too broad of a term in political debates today?